In 2020, Mega produced their very first buildable weapon for their Halo line in the form of the Energy Sword, set number GPB-05. It comes with 567 pieces and when complete is over 2 feet in length. It's my understanding that this set was very well received and appreciated by both the casual fan and collectors alike. I can't currently show you one of these swords built because as of the making of this video I haven't actually put one together. They've been sat on the shelf for about 3 years due to time restraints, but now seems like the right time to put it together so I can do a comparison video of all 3 weapons. A year after they produced the sword, Mega released the Covenant Needler, set HDC 30 in late 2021, which comes with 920 pieces and stands just over 1 foot in length. Once again, I haven't built this set either to date, but will do so as soon as I finish putting that sword together so I can use it for a comparison video. And this brings me nicely onto my latest Mega Ideas project. If you're unfamiliar with this series, it's where I create a custom build in what I believe to be the form of a feasible production line set, in the hope that it will build traction among the community in the form of positive feedback and buzz that Mega will hopefully see and then maybe consider actually producing an official set similar to what I have designed. So if you like what you see today and you want Mega to produce an official version of it, make sure you spam the comment section hard, letting Mega know just how badly you want one. So let's get into it. Mega Ideas Project 4, the Magnum. First thing I had to do was decide which Magnum I was going to build. I ultimately decided on the Reach version of the Magnum, purely because I personally like the look of that one the most. Once I decided which Magnum I was going to try and create, I then went about trying to get some source photos off the internet, which thankfully I was able to find on Halopedia to act as a reference for building the actual gun. And once I had my pictures, it was time to start building. Now I have to confess, I have never tried to build a custom weapon before. This is the first time I've ever tried anything like this. I also have to disclose at this point, there's no moving parts on this gun. You can't insert magazines or anything like that. And I also want to say I don't actually know very much about guns at all. So any mistakes made are purely because I don't really know much about guns. What I'm showing you here is how I created the front section of the gun. As you can see, there's all kinds of crazy building techniques going on here. Definitely some snot technique just to get the angles I wanted and to be able to use the pieces I wanted. It's also worth mentioning that this is not a refined version. This is just a purely rough copy. Many of these pieces could be substituted for more appropriate pieces, especially the plates, but as I'm building and I'm constantly changing it as I design it, I've just tend to just put what works in. If I wanted to go back, I could revise this and probably reduce the amount of parts used. But in all honesty, by the time I got it finished, I don't really care about that. If it was going to be a production line, it would be refined and you could definitely make this build process easier. This is purely me just showing you how I managed to get some of these angles and how I managed to get some of the parts to work the way they did to create the end shape. You'll also notice that I've mainly been using the old silver, the old mottled silver, rather than the new infinite silver. That's because, one, I prefer that color and I think it just suits a gun better. The really bright, shiny new silver, I just don't think it looks that good. I like this old silver. It's got that weathered effect to it, and for a gun, I think that really suits it. The downside is there are many parts that I needed for this that aren't in that old silver, so I've had to mix it up a little bit, and you'll see some of the parts in the newer silver, they do stand out. It's not intentional. It's either I only had them in that color or I didn't have enough in the older color to be able to use it all the way through the build. As for the back section, definitely had to get creative here. It's probably part of the build that I'm least happy with, but I didn't know how else to create the look at the back of the gun with those sloped tiles I've got in there. Ideally, if Mega was producing this, they'd probably just use a printed piece to represent that part of the gun. Next up, I created the black section underneath the front of the gun, which I have no idea what it's called. I don't know what it does. It was pretty tricky. The actual build was relatively straightforward, but I wasn't 100% on the actual shape. It does represent the shape on the gun, but as with everything when you're building with blocks, you want to get loads of detail in there, but it's really, really tricky when you're building at this scale. You're so limited. So ultimately I just went with, it looks the right shape, it fits on, and once the whole gun is together, it pretty much does what it needs to do. It says what it needs to say. So whilst not 100% happy, which is how I feel about most of the build, I'm happy enough with it. It does what it needs to do. And once it's on, it definitely finishes off the front of the gun, as you can see. The small red round pieces on the side, if you're wondering what they are, they're a relatively new piece as far as I'm aware. They were in the Cybertruck set, and I think they're going to come in handy for lots of detailing on future builds. And then the final part of the build was the actual handle itself. This was a right nightmare to do, to get the actual angles I wanted. I've taken the side of it off so you can see how I did it. Those silver blocks in the middle, they're purely there to stop the handle from squishing in. If you squeeze it, it just gives it a bit of structural bracing. And then as you can see, I've used angle brackets to get those angles for the front and the back of the gun, whilst I've used sloped tiles and plates to actually act as covers that can be clipped on to the side. Whilst it looks straightforward here, this took a long time and a lot of messing around. Also, I've got to be honest, although it clips in nicely here, these angles aren't 100%. They're about 98%. So there's a little bit of strain on there, which isn't ideal. It doesn't pop apart or anything like that. It stays really solid, but you can just see that the angles are very slightly off. There may be a solution to that, I'm not sure, but I really wasn't going to waste any more time. By the time I got it to this point and it worked, it worked. So as you can see, I've just got some of those double-sided stud pieces to be able to just clip it into the underside of the gun. And then once that's attached to the underside of the gun, you pretty much just have to clip the two parts of the handles together. That's another part I wasn't overly pleased with, the join where they join together. I would have liked that a bit more rounded, but that's a really tricky join to do. And then there you go. As you can see, once it's all together, it comes together pretty nicely. And in terms of scale, I looked up the size. The standard handgun is supposed to be 9 inches long, and this is about 8.5 inches long. So miraculously, it's actually pretty well scaled, even though I didn't even measure it until I'd finished it. But I think the most impressive thing for me is how good this thing feels in hand. It just feels so good, and it's just so perfectly balanced.
As all things should be.
So all in all, I'm pretty pleased with this, and I think if Mega actually had a go at doing this, they would obviously be able to do a better job. They'd be able to get some custom parts in there. My only worry is that they're never going to do UNSC weapons because, well, maybe because they're too realistic. We know Lego's stance on real weapons. They won't touch them. But I feel if anyone's going to do it, it would be Mega. As we all know, they love to give us what we want. So fingers crossed, if they do a UNSC weapon, I would love to get my hands on an official Magnum. And in case you're wondering, the printing on the side that I put there, that's just stencils. I just rubbed those on to give it a bit of extra detail. Obviously, an official one would be all printed tiles, but for me, stencil will do. So there you have it, my custom Magnum. And as I said earlier, don't forget, if you want to see an official one, have your say in the comment section below. If you don't want a Magnum, let them know what weapon you do want. We know they watch the videos, we know they read the comments, so have your say, and hopefully, fingers crossed, one day we may get an official Magnum. And that's it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.